Billy has said that during the recording of Siamese Dream, he felt enormous pressure because the band's future seemed to depend on the album succeeding.
After Nirvana Nevermind comes out, suddenly alternative rock just totally explodes. And then you have the huge success of Pearl Jam 10, Soundgarden, Nine Inch Nails creates a very big buzz. He put a lot of pressure on himself.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. Before we welcome our guest, just want to let you know, listeners and viewers, you can get 15% off classic rock merchandise at oldglory.com. Just use the code Booked on Rock and you'll get 15% off. A lot of great stuff there. The link's in the show notes, or you can go to bookedonrock.com and look for the My Deals tab. All right, so now on to our guest, a returning guest. I think this is number 14. I got to do an official count, but I know it's. I think you're tied with Martin Popoff. Greg Prato returns.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that.
I'm not standing. I'm sorry.
I always ask you, do you have your David Lee Roth Buttless chaps on?
I do.
Good.
That's the problem with this camera. It doesn't have the whole. But trust me, they're there. I'm going to see Dave when he comes to Connecticut. May 31st, I'm going to go see.
My cousin saw him a year ago and said it was a very fun show.
Cool. Diamond Dave. Yes. And then the 5150 Deluxe Edition comes out this week.
Yep.
So looking forward to that. But we're talking about Smashing Pumpkins today. Your brand new book is titled I Am One, The Smashing Pumpkins Story, 1988 to 1994. So tell us what inspired you to focus specifically on the years 1988 to 1994, rather than their entire career, because they are still an active band today. There's a current lineup, right?
Yep. Indeed, there is. Yeah. I think this book kind of came away. It was a little bit of like a hangover from my last book, which was the Alternative for the Masses book, which I, of course, was on your show talking about, which was about the 90s alternative movement. And that definitely included Smashing Pumpkins. They were one of the top bands of that era. So I guess maybe just from doing that book, I listened to a lot more Smashing Pumpkins. And it's weird. Like with most bands, I don't know if you're this way, Eric, but like with me, there's certain eras of bands that I usually favor. Like there's very few bands that I can listen from start to finish. Like Soundgarden is one band I could listen to all eras, and I love them all. Queen is pretty close as well. Van Halen with David Lee Roth, I loved everything they ever did with David Lee Roth. But Smashing Pumpkins, for me, really, it's their first two albums, Gish and Siamese Dream, and also the odds and ends set called Pisces Iscariot. That's really my Smashing Pumpkins. That's definitely the era that I listen to the most.
I'm the same way.
Because then they went on to have their biggest success after that with the Melancholy album. But that was when I tune out. I was not a fan of that.
It's almost like I'm looking into a mirror right now, because it is exactly the same thing as me. Although the one big difference is Gish, I did not listen to. I didn't know about. I had Siamese Dream. To this day, I still listen to it and I love it, but I never bought Gish. Okay. So reading your book, I was able to go and discover that album, and I didn't realize how great that is. Rhinoceros and so many great tracks on there. If you like Siamese Dream, you're going to like Gish. Billy Corgan's, his direction where he wanted to go did start to change in 96 with Melancholy. There's some good stuff on there. 1979, I love. There is some good stuff on there, but
just his singing style, I just didn't like anymore. And the production, I love Butch Vig's production on the first two Smashing Pumpkins albums. Then they moved to a gentleman named Flood, and it was more of like his background is more like electronic bands like Nine Inch Nails, and like he worked with like Depeche Mode and those bands. And I talk about in the book, like there are very few industrial or techno type rock albums that I've ever heard and said, wow, this is a great production. The only one I could really think of is the Downward Spiral from the band Nine Inch Nails. That's a great production. But for me, Butch Vig, I love Butch Vig's production. Everyone always talks about Nirvana Nevermind as it's definitely his most renowned album. But for me, his best production, I think, is the Siamese Dream album. That is a masterpiece from start to finish, song-wise, performance-wise, production-wise. It has it all. That's definitely that's the peak of Smashing Pumpkins for me.
It's got a warm sound to it. Gish as well, but especially Siamese Dream. It's just got a really warm sound to it. And it sounds like, I say this so many times, but it feels like you're in the room.
Yeah. Something else I had to make a point in this book. The guitar sound that Billy Corgan was able to get, and also James, the second guitarist, James Iha, I think is it's probably my one of my favorite rock guitar on a studio album sounds ever. They use
Absolutely.
the it's called the Big Muff pedal, which was from the late 60s, I believe, or like early 70s. And it's a very fuzzy tone. If you think of Blue Cheers, Summertime Blues, I don't think that they used that pedal. Like that was before that pedal was around. But that's kind of like the fuzzy sound that that pedal creates. The same with I Want to Be Your Dog by the Stooges. It's a very fuzzed out, distorted sound, but it's very warm sounding. If you think about the 80s guitar tones, as the 80s went along, guitar tones, you can't really think. I mean, although I like Metallica with Cliff Burton, did Metallica ever really have great guitar tones on their albums? I don't know, or like Megadeth. I absolutely love the band Megadeth, but I can't really think of any of their albums really having like a great, warm, interesting guitar sound, really.
Maybe
So
Ride the Lightning.
okay, yeah, all right, yeah, and you know what? Kill 'Em All is kind of interesting because it's almost like a demo sound, so that's kind of an interesting sound as well. It's very in your face, and of course. Master of Puppets is their all-time great classic album. But I mean, if you listen to Injustice for All, that's one of the worst produced albums ever. That has like no bass and it's just pure tinny. I can't even listen to that album. But yeah, the Smashing Pumpkins albums, Gish and especially Siamese Dream. I love the guitar sound. Billy Corgan surely be. We should all tip our cap to him for taking the time to getting a great guitar sound on that album.
He was influenced by Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine.
He was. Yeah, he was. He was also influenced by Queen, especially early Queen. He was a very big fan of. Yeah, so he had some very interesting influences.
So you open the Billy Corgan chapter. You note that he's been the one constant in the Smashing Pumpkins throughout all the lineup changes to this day. And you describe his early childhood growing up in Chicago and surrounding Illinois towns as being marked by divorce, instability, bullying, and his mother's struggles with mental health. How much do you think those early experiences shaped the emotional intensity that we hear in his songwriting, particularly on those first few albums?
Oh, very very much so. The song called "Disarm" is pretty much about his childhood and the sadness he experienced from the abuse that he endured. Yeah, I mean, to Billy's credit, he definitely had a very rough childhood, but he absolutely, well, I guess luckily for him, he found the perfect outlet, which was his music and guitar playing. So he was able to put all that into that, and he talked about well, like over the years how he felt suicidal in the early '90s, particularly, especially the period between Gish and also Siamese Dream. He considered suicide, but lucky for us, he didn't because it's kind of sad to think that we would have never gotten the Siamese Dream album and also all the other great music he's also given us over the years. But yeah, he just luckily for us was able to get past that, whereas sadly people like Kurt Cobain didn't. I guess we're all just different and we all handle problems differently.
Before the Pumpkins formed, he went through several earlier bands like Hexen, Coat of Eyes, and the Marked. Some of Marked's material has surfaced on YouTube. I haven't listened to it, but you note that he still had a ways to go with writing memorable songs around that period. He was in Florida at that time. During that same period, Billy saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers play in a tiny club and also caught a performance by Bad Brains. Talk about the impact those shows had on his mindset as a musician.
And also, I just want to ask you: did you ever see video footage of his high school band called Hexen? Did you see that?
No.
I highly recommend you and all the viewers check it out on YouTube. There is a guitar solo that he does. He's down at one of the members' basements, I guess is where they used to rehearse. And he does, I talk about that in the book. He does a guitar solo that's like beyond Yngwie Malmsteen.
Really?
Yes, I highly recommend. Check out. It's like Hexen Billy Corgan solo. Definitely check it out. I think you're going to be a very big fan of it, especially if like listening to like Van Halen and also Yngwie and Randy Rhoads and all that stuff that was popular at the time.
Right, because we find out years later he is a fan of those bands and those guitarists. He ends up interviewing Eddie.
Yes,
for
exactly.
Was it Guitar World?
It was Guitar World in 1996. I remember
right.
I remember buying the issue on my way to work back in 1996.
Yeah. He's a huge Van Halen fan, and he just had on his own show. He had Stephen Pearcy from Rat.
Yes, he did. Yeah. That's one thing that Billy Corgan has always been very vocal about, in the 90s, it wasn't so cool to say that you liked 80s metal, but I remember in like interviews as early as 94, 95, he was name checking Judas Priest and also, albums and bands by them. So
Right.
especially the British Steel album, I remember he mentioned. Yeah, so he
But
talked
but
about
the
that.
Chili Peppers and Bad Brains really formed his sound.
Yes. Yeah, like the mid 80s, of course, that we're still a few years before Nirvana, Nevermind changed everything. And alternative is still pretty much totally underground. The Red Hot Chili Peppers only have like one or two albums. The Bad Brains have a few albums, but they sadly never get really a major label shot until the 90s, and it's not nearly as good as what they were doing in the 80s. But he is lucky to see those two bands at their peak. I believe that would have been the Chili Peppers when Hillel Slovak was still in the band, and that's considered their best lineup. And the Bad Brains, that's their peak too. That's around the time of Eye Against Eye, which is my favorite Bad Brains album ever. That's a great, great album. But yeah, I think by seeing those two bands, that shows him that there's more than just. He seems like in high school he went from metal to being into like alternative then goth. It seems like he goes from listening to metal, then he goes to like Jesus and the Mary Chain and Depeche Mode, and then also like REM. I know he was into in the 80s as well. So it seems like maybe through the Bad Brains, because the Bad Brains Eye Against Eye album, that's definitely a melding of a bunch of different styles of music, like reggae, heavy metal. It's probably their first like hard rock, heavy metalish type album. There's a little bit of funk, not that much, but on like later albums, they had some more funkier stuff. But maybe seeing the Bad Brains and also the Chili Peppers maybe expanded his horizons and also showed that there was maybe something on the horizon that was going to be coming, soon that was going to give us a much needed alternative to all the bad hair metal that was popular at the time.
Yeah, and you also talk in the book about how he was able to figure out a way to write songs around the guitar. He realized he wasn't going to be the kind of guitarist like an Eddie Van Halen or that type, but
Right.
you're saying he did have that capability. But I think he found his strike zone there was writing particular songs built around a riff.
Yeah, but I do have to say, when I was thinking around the time I was doing this book, going back and listening to all the solos, Billy Corgan, I would think, is my favorite guitarist that came out of the 1990s. To be honest with you, I think his solos are great. The thing I talk about also in the book, the why I loved Smashing Pumpkins so much, especially at the time in like 1991. I, at that point, am just transitioning away from strictly listening to heavy metal and listening to like alternative and funk and all other styles of music. And the Smashing Pumpkins were definitely a bridge type band, like them, Soundgarden, Faith No More. That for people that were into heavy metal, it showed you that yeah, you could still do like heavy music, but you could also inject alternative and also other different styles. It's not, you don't have to stay in just one lane, and that's absolutely what Billy Corgan did. And yeah, his soloing on especially the first two Smashing Pumpkins albums, have some of my favorite solos. Like the solo to Cherub Rock is great. The solo in Siva I love. The solo in Geek USA. There's a great, great B-side called Starla, which is like a 10-minute long song, and the solo is like a good 4 or 5 minutes, and it's just him just shredding, but not shredding doing mindless like that 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 type of stuff. But it's like, very it's like notes placed properly. He can play fast, but just I love his phrasing and it's, melodic playing. So yeah, so Billy Corgan is absolutely one of my favorite guitarists.
So having said that, maybe, and I was trying to find that part of the book where he talks about that, but maybe he kind of didn't think of himself as a great guitarist, or he kind of downplayed that because it seemed like he didn't think he was.
I don't think he did yet because his father was also a guitarist, and his father never really. It was kind of difficult to get, I think, compliments out of him, especially when it came to Billy's music and also his playing. Once, when I interviewed Billy for Rolling Stone, and I included it in the book, he credits his father with his kind of strictness or his unwillingness to give him just compliments very easily concerning his playing on the guitar. That also made him, I think. Try harder and also develop his own style. Because to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Billy Corgan has ever taken a guitar lesson in his life, and that to me I always find fascinating when there's people that just are born with a gift that they could just pick up a guitar and they know what to do and they just are awesome at guitar soloing and songwriting and also riff writing and of course like I just mentioned before coming up with very interesting tones and things like that. So yeah.
We talked about those bands that he was in, but finally he finds the lineup that would become the Smashing Pumpkins, and the original lineup is Billy Corgan on vocals and guitar, James Iha on guitar, Darcy Retzky on bass, Jimmy Chamberlain on drums, who you are a huge fan of.
Yes.
What is the origin story? How does that lineup come together?
Billy Corgan meets James Eha through a mutual acquaintance named Len. I believe what it was Billy was working at a record store at the time, and he was friends with a gentleman named Len. I think he was like writing songs with him just on the side. And the guy Len knew James Eha, so he introduced them, and they both liked the same. James Eha, similar to Billy Corgan, he seemed to enjoy heavy metal, but also bands like Echo and the Bunnymen and like alternative bands that were popular at that time. And the story goes that one night Billy Corgan goes to see a band called the Dan Reed Network play live in Chicago. And if you go back and listen to Dan Reed Network, it's not, it's like almost like dance music. It was very strange that he would have been going to that. To me, I think Billy Corgan was just going out to just shows every night or whenever he could go out. So he is waiting outside. I think after the show, he's outside the venue, and he gets into a argument with a woman there about if it was like a good band or if it was a fake band or it was like a band that was put together, like or if it's like valid music. And they get into an argument, and then somehow it gets brought up that Darcy is a bassist as well, and Billy's looking for a bassist. So that's how Darcy winds up signing on with them. And then later, a friend recommended Jimmy Chamberlain as the drummer. And yeah, Jimmy Chamberlain is probably my favorite drummer of the 90s. In fact, he's one of my favorite drummers ever. He's one of the few drummers that takes the power of John Bonham, but I don't really hear any John Bonham in his playing though. So it's a very like strong, muscular, hard-hitting sound, but it's totally his own thing. And yeah, really, I was thinking again the other day, Billy Corgan, one of my favorite guitarists, and Jimmy Chamberlain, one of my favorite drummers, and they happen to be in the same band together, which is very interesting. I guess similar in a way to Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen is one of my favorite guitarists, and I love also Alex Van Halen. Interesting how that, it's an interesting comparison there.
Over the years, Billy's given a few different explanations about the band's name. From your research, is there a definitive meaning behind Smashing Pumpkins, or has it always remained intentionally mysterious?
I think it's intentionally mysterious. He like over the years he gave a few different reasons, and I include them in the book. But one thing that's interesting is when when I first bought Gish, it was just Smashing Pumpkins. Then by Melancholy, it is the Smashing Pumpkins. And if you look back to their first ever demo, that was also the Smashing Pumpkins. And then I guess as it went on, they dropped the from it. But I know Billy Corgan once told, I believe it was Matt Pinfield, that it was the Smashing Pumpkins as like a British thing, like the Smashing being like a great thing, like the Smashing or like the Glorious Pumpkins, like that type of thing. So that's what he said. But he's also given some other reasons over the years, like it just means nothing. But then he's also said that. So I guess it depends on what a day of the week you would ask him that question.
So it's still a mystery.
Yeah.
Looking back now, that moment where Courtney Love crosses paths with Billy Corgan, and then Kurt Cobain almost, that reads like a scene from a rock documentary.
It does, right?
Film. And that episode stands out. It's one of the strange twists in the early alternative rock world. How did they meet, and how did Kurt enter the picture?
I think they meet because the Smashing Pumpkins and Hole were on the same indie label at the time called Caroline. They both put out their first albums through that. So I think maybe through that is how they met. And then they're dating. But then what's interesting is Billy Corgan has a girlfriend that I think he's living with at the time, but he's also seeing Courtney Love. There's like a period of time where it's kind of unclear and fuzzy as to if Billy Corgan is still living with his girlfriend or if they're broken up or what. But there was a period that him and Courtney Love began dating. And Billy Corgan's based in Chicago. And Courtney Love, I believe, is based in LA at the time, I think, or like on the West Coast or someplace. But Billy Corgan winds up getting a call one day, and it's Courtney Love, and this would have been in 1991. And she goes, "Hey, would you like to see me?" And he's thinking like, "Yeah, we'll set up a day or a date, and you can come out." And he's like, yeah, sure. And she's like, great. I'm, at the airport, or I'm like right down the street or something like that. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's like, I guess he, wasn't like prepared for that. So the story goes that then she, from that phone call, leaves wherever she was, goes to see Nirvana play, who just happened to be in the area playing. And she winds up hooking up with Kurt Cobain. And Billy Corgan claims that the next day, Courtney Love called him and said, hey, do you still want to get together? And Billy Corgan was like, well, no, you're with Kurt Cobain. His quote is, you can't go from rock star A and go to rock star B.
Right.
So then, yeah, so that, and as we all know, then Courtney Love and also Kurt Cobain fall in love and they get married and everything, and they have the whole Sid and Nancy thing going on. But that's a whole other story, right?
Right. What a wild story that is. The
Yeah.
fact that they crossed paths that early. So then the Smashing Pumpkins signed with Virgin Records, began recording Gish. You point out that the guitar tones on Gish really stood apart from what most rock bands were doing at the time. What exactly made Billy Corgan and James Iha's guitar sound so distinctive on that album?
Well, there's one thing I just want to say too that you just brought up. What's interesting is they signed with Virgin, but they cover it up by saying our first album is going to come out on Caroline, which is a independent subsidiary of Virgin, which was very smart because other bands did that at the time too. Like Soundgarden signed with A&M in the late '80s, and they said, but before we do that album, we want to do an album for SST Records, which was the Ultra Mega OK album, because it was kind of popular at the time, because I guess bands like Soundgarden and the Smashing Pumpkins had the foresight to see that it makes sense to kind of build your indie underground cred first and build a fan base, and then you make the jump to a major label. Kind of just like going step by step, a gradual, as opposed to just a big, explosion like Quiet Riot or The Knack, where you just come out of nowhere and you explode, and then you can't handle the success, and then your career is over. So that was a pretty wise part, I think, on the Smashing Pumpkins. But yeah, but getting back to your question about as far as getting a good guitar sound, Billy Corgan played a Strat, a early '70s Strat, and James Iha played I believe, a '70s Black Les Paul. And Billy Corgan got his Strat, which he referred to as the Gish Strat. He actually bought it from Jimmy Chamberlain. It was a yellow Strat. It was a bullet Strat, which means the truss rod looks like it's like a bullet sticking out, kind of similar to what Richie Blackmore played with Deep Purple in the early '70s, and also what Yngwie Malmsteen would later play. But Billy Corgan talks about how he never wanted just a plain yellow Strat, so he took paint with a paintbrush and just stabbed the guitar. I mean, not stab, but like put it all over the guitar to give it like a psychedelic type look. And then they also used, I believe, Marshall amps. And like I mentioned before, they got great fuzzy sounds from a Big Muff Pi pedal, which it was made by, the brand was called Electro Harmonics. That was who made it, and it was, I believe, a Brooklyn-based company. And they still are around. And I actually have, I bought one of those pedals myself, which is definitely fun to use because you just plug right into it and you get the Gish Siamese Dream sound, which is absolutely a very fun sound to play with.
That's
Makes all
cool.
your like riffs sound great. So that's, yeah, yeah. And then we have to also thank Butch Vig. He just knew how to produce bands at that time great, and just have a great live vintage sound. The thing that I talked about in the last time I was on, talking about the Alternative for the Masses book, what was great about bands like Smashing Pumpkins is they went back to the '70s production wise. They were like, no, we do not want anything from the '80s with production. We want to go back to our Led Zeppelin albums, our Black Sabbath albums, our Blue Cheer albums. That's the guitar sound we want. We want a organic live sound, a nice natural fuzz guitar tone, and that's exactly what they were able to accomplish on Gish and also Siamese Dream.
Absolutely. Here's the quote I think that I was referring to about his approach to the guitar and songwriting. So it's not necessarily to put himself down, but well, here it is. Another time he recalled about this time. So I think you're referring to, this is his high school days. Yeah. Many of his high school classmates were going to be going to college in the fall, and Billy opted to take a gamble rather than continuing his education. He'd instead pursue his rock and roll dreams. And he recalls, quote, when I was 18 years old, I reached a pivotal point. I was out of school and I decided I was going to play music. I had long black hair. I looked weird. I acted weird. And I played a heavy metal style of guitar that was not popular with my friends. Everybody I knew who looked like me played like Robert Smith of The Cure, and everybody who played like me had big poodle hair. Finally, I decided that the guitar playing angle was useless and that I would start working on my songwriting. Then I began using my knowledge of the guitar to help me with the writing. So that's the quote I was referring to. Not that he didn't put his guitar playing down, but I think he realized that he wasn't going to go with the hairband quote unquote style. He was going to really focus on songwriting,
Right.
and
But
then
again,
incorporates that guitar style into it.
that shows how smart he is, though. That's similar to Kurt Cobain. They realized how important songwriting is. And I know we've talked about in one of my previous appearances on the podcast, Eddie Van Halen. The thing that I of course enjoy his solos, but my favorite top thing of Eddie Van Halen was his riff writing, but most importantly, songwriting. That was, I think, and I even interviewed Wolfgang once, and he pretty much said, "Yeah, I totally agree with you that it was the riff writing and also the quality of the songs. I mean, if you solo over a shitty song, who the hell wants to hear that, you know?" So to Billy Corgan's credit, Kurt Cobain's credit, Chris Cornell's credit, all those guys from the '90s alternative, they all realized like, yeah, you can solo, but what's the point of soloing over crappy music? You have to be able to work on your songwriting and be able to write songs. So that's also
Running
what
with the
I love
devil,
about Smash.
the classic example. And Alex was talking about that in that interview we did recently with there was a Brazilian YouTube channel, and he said the first time I heard Eddie play "Running with the Devil," he was like, "That's it. You're the songwriter, not
Yeah, yeah,
me."
right.
It's the songwriting that's key.
Mhm.
Now, Gish opens with "I Am One," which almost feels like a mission statement for the band. What made that song such a fitting introduction to the Smashing Pumpkins sound and attitude?
Well, it's the guitar, it's the riff. Something that happens in the middle of the song is it breaks down. It's just the bass, and that's something that Billy Corgan likes to do in his songs. He likes the song to break down to either it being one or two instruments or just his voice. That's happened several times over the years. So that was a pretty interesting song. But to me, really, the best introduction to the Smashing Pumpkins was the song Siva. That was the first song I heard. I talk about in the book how I remember it was the summer of 1991. There was the 120 Minutes program on MTV. Used to be on Sunday night, I believe, starting at 12 o'clock. It was on for 2 or 3 hours, depending on what year it was. It would fluctuate times. And between that and also Headbangers Ball, those were the two specialty programs I watched over and over. I made it a point to watch those because that's how you discovered all these great new bands. And I remember it was late at night and the Siva video came on, and it's such a great video. It's still one of my favorite videos to this day. Because my favorite videos, I usually do not like videos that have a storyline to them, unless they're the David Lee Roth videos. I love the David Lee Roth videos. But in the 80s and early 90s, you get all these horrible storyline videos that are just have not aged well at all, or just these like horrible artsy fartsy videos. Like not to backtrack, but the Blind Melon Change video comes to mind. It's a great song. It's ruined by a horrible video.
That's the one they're all in the mud. Is it?
I
No, that's a
no
different
no no
one.
that's the I Wonder video.
Yeah,
But the change video, it's just a bunch of scenes that make no sense. Like it's Shannon Hoon and silver or gold, and there's like a scene with like a someone holding a ceramic pig. It just makes no sense. It's so stupid.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a band. There's also a band I love called Jellyfish from the
yeah.
90s,
I
and
remember that name.
yeah, and they put out a great album called Spilt Milk that should have spawned like 3 or 4 hit singles, and they had like the worst videos ever that just made no sense and just took away from the songs. So a bad video can really kill you. I mean, we can't look further beyond, of course, Billy Squire, right? I mean, isn't
There
that
you
the ultimate
go.
example
Yeah, there you
with
go.
the song called "Rock Me Tonight"?
Oh yeah,
But
dressed in pink,
yeah,
prancing
yeah.
around. Yeah, yeah. Siva video. What was the Siva video about? Like, what's
Yeah, so what makes the Siva video so special is it's just it gives like a hallucinogenic vibe, and it's very creepy, and it's like very dark looking, and it's very moody. Something that they were able to recreate on the next few videos. On the rhinoceros video is also a very interesting looking video, and then also Cherub Rock from the next album Siamese Dream is a similar very interesting looking video. that all these videos, if you watch late at night, gives you like a certain mood setting feel type thing, which I highly recommend. You should check out those three videos, watch it late at night, and it gives off a very interesting vibe.
Remember the Tool videos?
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
say that.
Yes, exactly. It's like similar to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
Saturday nights in the fall around that time, 91, 92,
Uh-huh.
watching Headbangers Ball.
Yep.
That was when Kiss had the Revenge
Yes.
album out, and some of the videos were on there
Yeah,
too.
Headbangers Ball in 120 Minutes was kind of like my Spotify at the time. That's what you went to discover bands. I remember discovering Smashing Pumpkins that way, and yeah, that was definitely those two shows introduced me to a lot of bands that became my favorites.
Yeah, Siva, Rhinoceros, great songs, but that entire album is, from start to finish, it's solid, but they step it up even further on the next album. Greg Prato, the author of the brand new book, I Am One, The Smashing Pumpkins Story, 1988 to 1994. So you go to the end of 92, the band finally had material they felt that could follow Gish. That would lead to Siamese Dream. Billy has said that during the recording of Siamese Dream, he felt enormous pressure because the band's future seemed to depend on the album succeeding. How much did that pressure contribute to both the intensity of the music and the tension within the band at that time?
There was a lot going on at the time. Billy talks about feeling pressure because Gish came out prior to Nirvana Nevermind. After Nirvana Nevermind comes out, then suddenly alternative rock just totally explodes, and then you have the huge success of Pearl Jam 10, and of course the grunge bands such as Soundgarden. Nine Inch Nails creates a very big buzz. There's all these bands that are now suddenly that are huge in 91, 92 that wouldn't have been huge if they came out in, say, like the early 80s. It's all about time and when they come out. So yeah, so you had that. So he put a lot of pressure on himself. Billy Corgan has talked over the years that he suffered from a very bad case of writer's block around that time. But by doing this book and listening to demos and watching YouTube footage, he had almost half of Siamese Dream written in like 91, early 92. So I don't know if it's just like him not remembering it correctly or what it was. So, I mean, maybe just he wanted to have more songs than he needed to have like a pool of songs to choose from. Maybe that's what he meant. But he already had some great songs written.
Maybe it was lyrics, because you talk about him sitting down at the typewriter, typing pages and pages of lyrics before he picked out something that made him, but this is interesting, that made him feel the most embarrassed.
That's what he said. Yeah, I mean, some of his lyrics. Yeah, he said he wrote it that way. I believe some lyrics he just probably wrote right in the studio too. I know Kurt Cobain did that. David Lee Roth did that. That to me, I always find fascinating how some people just have a gift that they could just sit down and write great lyrics, or like on the spot. That to me is definitely a talent. But yeah, but Billy Corgan's lyrics. What's funny is I loved his singing style on the first two Smashing Pumpkins albums. It's a very interesting singing style. It's similar to, I talk about in the book, similar to your Paul Stanleys or your Joey Ramones, your like Alice Cooper, Mick Jagger, where they're not like your super singer. They're not like your Freddie Mercury. They're not like Ronnie James Dio. But if you hear a few seconds of Paul Stanley, you know exactly who that is. And his voice fits that music perfectly. The same with Billy Corgan on the first two Smashing Pumpkins albums. I thought had a very interesting singing style. He could like holler and scream, but he also had like a very breathy, like when he would play quiet type material. He had a very breathy singing style, which I haven't really heard anyone else do, which was very original for its time. And also the lyrics. I loved his lyrics on those first two Smashing Pumpkins albums. They're very evocative, and again, some of them tell a story, some of them just bring images to mind, similar to like a Chris Cornell, where just like lines strewn together kind of can make like a picture in your mind.
You bring up an interesting point, because you are right about that. And I wonder if, did Butch Vig do the Siamese Dream
Yes,
album
yeah,
too,
he
right?
did the
Okay.
first two Smashing
He did the
Pumpkins albums.
first two. He didn't do anything after that.
Didn't do anything after that.
Because
That was it.
I agree with you. Like, his voice blends with the guitars really well. Like, they mesh well together. And then I agree, after that,
Yes,
I didn't really feel that same way. Could
right.
that be Butch Vig?
Yes, 100%. Certain bands, they find a producer that they stick with. Like I'm thinking like Rush with the producer Terry Brown. They realized they had something good and they stuck with him for like 10 years or whatever. I really wish that's what Smashing Pumpkins did with Butch Vig, because besides producing, Butch Vig definitely had a knack with the Smashing Pumpkins with being able to select the best material. He would also offer suggestions to also improve songs. He got a great singing out of Billy Corgan. Of course, we talked about before the guitar sound I love. I also love Jimmy Chamberlin's drum sound. I really wish the Pumpkins stuck with Butch Vig. And I've interviewed Butch Vig and also Billy Corgan over the years, and I asked them both, would you ever work with each other again? And they both said yes, but that was like a long time ago. So I'm still holding out hope that one year that Butch Vig will unite with Smashing Pumpkins and they'll do something again together because that to me is my favorite when Butch Vig is producing Smashing Pumpkins.
Sure. What's the current lineup right now?
Well, I know that we have Jimmy Chamberlin on drums, we have James Eha on guitar, we have Billy Corgan on guitar. The names after that, I'm a little fuzzy on. The guitarist, they have a third guitarist named Kiki Wong. I know that she just joined like a year or two ago. She's like a heavy metal shredder, which, to be honest, I'm not that big a fan of. I don't think it really fits the Smashing Pumpkins music that like that, but you know, Billy Smashing Pumpkins is without a doubt Billy Corgan's band. It's whatever he wants to do. You got to just let him do what he wants to do. And then the bassist, I forget the gentleman's name, but I believe he's the son of Joy Division's bassist. I just don't know his name though.
Okay. So it's three of the four members.
Three of the original. Darcy Retsky left the band, I believe, in 1999 or 2000, I think 1999, and she's pretty much retired from music. She's out of the public eye. She's unfortunately over the years, like this is like a long time ago. I know she was back in the news for like things that you don't want to be involved like in the news for like getting busted with drugs. And there was also like a weird thing where she has a horse farm. I think some horses got loose or something weird like that. And there was like a mugshot of her. I know that was making the rounds. But again, this is like 10 or 15 years ago. So I have no idea what she's up to now.
Going back to Siamese Dream now, Cherub Rock opens the album with a very direct critique of the alternative rock scene and music industry politics at the time. What was Billy Corgan reacting to when he wrote that song, and why was it a perfect track to open the album, you think?
Well, it's similar to the Nirvana song called "School" that I know Kurt Cobain's lyric, as I believe "You're in high school again" was his lyric, and similarly, Billy Corgan says, "Who wants honey as long as there's money?" And I think what they're both getting at is they experienced high school where there's all cliques. You know, there's the nerds, the jocks, the rockers. There's all these different things, and then what happens? You get on these record labels like Sub Pop or whatever, and then suddenly there are these cliques like, oh, are you authentic, or are you a band that like a record label put together? You know, are you just like a stupid like heavy metal guy, or are you like a true punk rocker or not? So it's just funny how, you know, with especially Billy Corgan in that song Cherub Rock, he couldn't escape pretty much what he experienced in high school with all the cliques and sets and things like that. And that was him pointing it out that it was, I guess, kind of funny in a way, in a twisted kind of way.
Let me out.
Yeah, that was what he says.
Let me out. Today, one of the band's most recognizable songs. Today was a huge hit. I don't know if
Yes.
it was top 10, but I know it was a big hit on MTV and the radio. Lyrically, it's actually rooted in Billy Corgan dealing with depression. You mentioned that. You talked about his depression. Why do you think that contrast between the upbeat sound and the darker meaning resonated so strongly with listeners?
Well, it's a very, very melodic song. It's probably one of the more melodic songs on the Siamese Dream album. And it starts with a very interesting, almost like he's playing like a music box sounding little motif on his guitar, which interesting. We learned in the book he just came up with on the spot one day at band rehearsal. They actually had the whole song written, but they didn't know how to start it. So he just stood there and just played anything. And then he played that. He looked up. All the band members then just went into the song. And all right. So then that's how they came up with that. But yeah, that song was supposedly the lyrics were he wrote a song. The lyric is "Today is the greatest day I've ever known," and he wrote that when he was at his lowest, concerning being depressed. So that's one good thing that came out of his depression was a song like "Today." And then also there was a period of time where they were demoing or actually recording material for what was going to be on Siamese Dream, and I guess they were purposely not playing it for the record label. And finally, Billy Corgan was like, "All right, fine, come and just listen to this one song." And he played them this song today, and they all went absolutely gaga for it. They were like, "Oh, great, this is fantastic. This album's going to be great." So that just kind of put everyone's mind at ease after they heard that song today.
And that's the video where he's in the ice cream truck.
Yes, he's in the ice cream truck. Yep. That was to me that was like the last Smashing Pumpkins video that I could say I kind of liked. I mean, it was definitely veering more towards the storyline type thing, but it still was a little bit artsy, but not as direct. Then after that, you get into the Disarm video. I'm not really, it's a little too artsy for me. The Rocket video, I don't really care for. The Bullet with Butterfly video, Bullet with Butterfly Wings video. At that point, I check out with Smashing Pumpkins. It's like a totally different band at that point.
Disarm is one of the most emotionally raw songs on that album. Deals with childhood pain and family relationships. How important was that level of the personal honesty in defining that emotional core of the album as a whole?
Yeah, that was a huge part. I mean, for Billy Corgan, that's like a page out of his diary, pretty much. It seems like just him talking about all the abuse. It was mental and also physical that he suffered as a child. And yeah, it seems like he was almost exercising his demons, but not in a loud rock song, but in a very pretty, beautiful sounding ballad with strings and timpani. So again, the thing which was great about also Billy Corgan is he was not just in one, again, like not in one lane when it came to writing types of music. He drew from heavy metal, ballads. Later, he would do like the song 1979 is like a new wave electronic type thing. So again, it's very interesting the wide variety of styles he's done over the years.
Yeah, 1979 I like. And what was the other song that
Was
was
it a
a
hit or was it
it was a hit.
there was a Zero that has the riff.
I didn't like that one. It
Okay.
was a softer one.
33.
Yes,
That's it. Yeah.
that's a
You know
great
what's
song.
funny is on that Melancholy album, the more experimental songs like 33, 1979, those are the ones I actually liked more. Or like there's a song called We Only Come Out at Night, which is kind of like it's supposed to be like a goof type song. But I found those much more interesting than Bullet with Butterfly Wings and all the other, and even like, yeah, even the song Tonight, Tonight, I wasn't even, it was just, but I'm sure we'll get to that at some point during this interview, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I bought that double CD, and
I did too.
yeah, I never really listened to it from start to finish a lot because I just kind of ran out of steam for me. But
Yeah.
anyway, back to Siamese Dream. For years, this is interesting. For years, there were rumors that Billy played a lot of the guitar and the bass parts on the album, and producer Butch Vig later confirmed to you,
Confirmed to me, yes.
yes, that he did most of the overdubs. That Billy did most of the overdubs. Now, how widely known was that at the time, and did it surprise fans when it finally came out?
What's funny is with like revisionist history, it's like, oh yeah, everybody knew. But I'm thinking back to the time, there was like there were whispers of it. I think there was maybe like one or two. Like I know kind of what really how most people found that out was there was a Rolling Stone cover story in early 1994. And I think that was when they came right out and said it. And Billy Corgan says it wasn't him who said it. It was actually Darcy and also James Eha supposedly that were the ones that went on record. Billy Corgan said he would have been comfortable just not saying anything and just letting, just not commenting on it. But yeah, over the years, and now it's pretty much common knowledge that it sounds like he played the vast majority of guitar and also bass. Not because Darcy and James Eha are like bad players or anything, just that when you're under the gun with like timelines and deadlines that you have to meet, and when you're working with a producer, you're trying, and if you can play something better than someone else, you want to get the best performance on tape. So I think that's why they wound up going to Billy playing a lot of the stuff on those two albums. But yeah, now it's kind of common knowledge that it was mostly Billy who played guitar and bass.
So the cover of the album, two young girls with angel wings embracing, which doesn't seem directly tied to the album's title or the lyrics or anything like that. But do we know what the band or the photographer were trying to convey with that image?
What's interesting is the inside of the album. It's all old photos that look like photos that you would have gone up to like your attic, and it's like all black and white. But then what Billy Corgan did, him and his wife at the time, who was a artist, they took Sharpies, but like the metallic Sharpies, and they wrote like all little like doodles on the pictures, and also wrote lyrics from the songs and everything like that, which I thought was a very cool touch. And I think maybe the cover is supposed to be kind of like a reflection of that. It was a recent photo that was taken, but I think like they made it look like it could have been maybe like a small child's party from like the 70s or 80s or something like that. And then when you open up this, back then it was CDs were that's how I bought Siamese Dream was on CD. When you open up the booklet, were all these like interesting old photos of what looks like from the 40s and 50s of all people and also lyrics and also little doodads written on them.
All right. So are they like the B girl? Do they show up at conventions and things, or what's the
I don't
story
think
with the
so.
two girls?
And it's funny. That would have been a golden opportunity. The Smashing Pumpkins could have done a video similar to No Rain, like Blind Melon. They could have put those two girls in a video, but they chose not to, or the idea just never came up, I guess. But yeah, that would have made sense, though, right?
Sure. If they
Yeah.
did, they would have become famous like the B girl.
Eric should be a music video director. That
I,
proves this.
I missed out on my opportunity. By the way, the album was recorded in Marietta, Georgia,
Hmm.
Triclops Studio.
Yes.
Yeah. There's this almost unbelievable story. It's hard to believe, but it actually happened. Jimmy Chamberlain, he disappeared for a week in Atlanta,
Yes.
and the band even they mentioned it on the radio.
Hmm.
Like could somebody if you see Jimmy, please tell him
Right.
back home. What does that episode reveal about how chaotic things were at that time during
Yeah,
that
that's
time?
also something else about that period that I forgot to mention was Jimmy Chamberlain had a very bad drug problem at the time, and you couldn't really trust him. He would sometimes show up to rehearsal, sometimes not. Seems like he would sometimes be at recording sessions, sometimes would not show up. So yeah, that definitely added to all the stress with everything that was going on at the time. So yeah, and the story goes, of course, this is before cell phones, that they are at Triclops Studio, they're recording, and then suddenly Jimmy Chamberlain just disappears for days on end, and they don't know where the hell he is, and they have to finish this album. And they had to go on. Billy Corgan claims that they went on the radio and said, "Hey, if anyone knows where Jimmy Chamberlain, our drummer, is, tell him we're still working on the album to come back." And eventually he turned up, and they were able to finish what is now a classic album.
Yeah, he went through a rough period, and I do remember. I think maybe it was kind of one of those like tough love things where Billy Corgan removed him from the band and said, "If you don't get your shit together, we can't play with you anymore." If I recall correctly, that was the
He went to rehab, and then also, of course, later in 1996, he winds up overdosing but doesn't die. But the then Smashing Pumpkins touring keyboardist Jonathan Melvoin, I think, did the drugs with him or bought the drugs with him, and he unfortunately died. And that's then Jimmy Chamberlain gets thrown out of the Pumpkins for like a year or two at that point.
but it's a great story because he's doing really well these days. Apparently,
Yes.
he's in the band doing well. So that's a success story that unfortunately isn't always the case in rock and roll. So by the end of '94, after the success of Siamese Dream, Smashing Pumpkins go from a Chicago club band to one of the biggest names in alternative rock. At that moment, just before Melancholy, where do you think the band stood creatively, culturally? Where were they at that point?
Well, I just want to point out that is precisely where I cut off the book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
1994.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why I cut off the book also ties in with your question. Yeah, so I set my sights up very, very high for the next Smashing Pumpkins album because on the previous two, they totally blew me away. Like, with Gish, I wasn't knowing what exactly to expect, and it was just out of left field, an album I loved. The second album, Siamese Dream, I was like, all right, well, look, I love this first album, Gish. Hopefully they deliver the goods, and they absolutely did. So why not think a little that why not think that they're going to outdo themselves again, especially because Billy Corgan at the time was saying things like we're going to outdo Siamese Dream and also in this next album like everything is going to be I'm going to do like a Pet Sounds Brian Wilson type thing like everything's in the stew like hard rock symphonic stuff everything so I'm like all right great. And then I heard the Bullet with Butterfly Wings single on the radio. I was not impressed. I talk about in the book that to me it sounded like a caricature of the Smashing Pumpkins. Even the lyric, despite all my rage, despite all my rage, I'm still just a rat in the cage. People latch on to that to this day and they consider it like a classic lyric and everything. But I always thought it was like a stupid lyric. To me, it sounded like Billy Corgan writing like a goof lyric. And he then later on Howard Stern even admitted that so much.
A little too cliche.
Yeah, exactly, and that spilled over throughout the whole album. Just the lyrics, I could not get behind. It was just cliche type stuff, like him writing what sounded. It was almost like him trying to write what people like, what he thought people wanted to hear from the Smashing Pumpkins, almost in certain areas. And it just, yeah, his singing was different. He was then doing a very nasally
Right.
singing thing. It was very compressed sounding, and I just did not like the singing style.
It's almost like a
Um,
whiny type of sound.
Whiny,
I hate to
yes,
say that.
exactly.
I mean, he's
And to me, it was just, it was really sad because I love the first two albums. His singing, I loved. I loved the singing. I loved the lyrics, the performance. Just yeah, I mean, even like the riffs, like the song Zero has like an okay riff, but that's even kind of like a cliche Smashing Pumpkins B-side type riff. It's not, you know. And then there were certain songs that had potential, like a song called Muzzle, a song called Porcelina of the Vast Oceans. And then my favorite song on the whole album is the last song called Farewell and Goodnight,
hmm,
which I actually do like a lot.
it's been so long. I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it. I'll
Yeah.
listen to it.
Actually, Christopher Thorne, who I I did a phone interview with for this book, had a very good quote. He's like, um, look, I'm a huge Beatles. This is what he said. He says, I'm the biggest Beatles fan there is, but I'll tell you, I can condense the White Album to one single album, and I'm totally good with that. And he said, one bad thing that was happening in the '90s is suddenly everyone thought they had to make like 70-minute long albums, like they're like Soundgarden Super Unknown, and goes beyond 70 minutes. And then of course you had Smashing Pumpkins that like they have the opportunity to do a double album doesn't mean that just because you have the opportunity to do something doesn't mean that you should do it. Is Siamese Dream what made it work so well is it was concise. And what's funny enough, Siamese Dream and even Gish had outstanding B-sides, so great to the point that there's certain songs that really could have been on the album. Like on Gish, there's a song called Plume. That's a great song. Blue is a great song. On Siamese Dream, you had Hello, Kitty Cat is a great song. Pissant is a great song. All these songs that were good enough to be on the album, but they, didn't jam it all on the album. On Melancholy, there's just it's all just jammed, and it just. I talk about this also in the book. Is it seemed like listening back to it because I listened to it while I was doing research for the book, thinking that well maybe if I now listen to it many years later, maybe I'll think differently. But no, I got the same vibe, but this time I got the vibe. It almost sounded like they were rushing to meet like a deadline almost. Like certain songs don't even sound like fully finished, just almost like a demo type thing. But I do mention in the book that's the biggest selling Smashing Pumpkins
I
album.
was about to say
So
that. Yeah, yet
yeah.
it was like
So
considered a masterpiece, and the
right. I mean
critics loved
similar
it.
similar to the Metallica Black album. I do not like that album at all, but that is the one of the biggest selling albums ever. And I'm not a big fan of Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, but that
Mm.
is one of the biggest selling albums ever. So I guess the moral of this story is do not go by what Greg Prato thinks concerning album sales or anything like that. Is it?
No, listen, hey, but that's what I like about you, man. You just speak your mind, tell it like it is. That's what you feel. I mean, I
Yeah.
agree with what you're saying, and I'll say this is an argument for the vinyl era even more than everybody always talks about how great the sound was. That warm sound of vinyl, but it forced these bands and these artists. There was only so many songs you could fit.
Yes.
All right, so you had to pare it down to 10, 11 songs or whatever. So then you had to come up with the best of the best, and you'd have
Yeah.
to discard songs that may even be okay, but those types of songs end up on CDs. It was you could just fit as much as you want in there,
As much as you want.
and I
Exactly.
think cassettes had the same restrictions too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cassettes were the
Yeah, they
same
did.
thing. So
And then something also I also mention is sadly, I remember 2 or 3 days before Melancholy dropped, that was when Shannon Hoon died. And I was a huge, as you know, a huge Blind Melon fan. And I loved their album Soup that just came out 1 or 2 months before. So, that's an album that I set my expectations high and my expectations were met. In fact, beyond met because to this day, it's one of my favorite albums of all time.
same here.
So sadly, Shannon Hoon dies, and I'm just sad and depressed because there goes one of my favorite bands and there goes one of my favorite singers. So I'm thinking, all right, well, here comes this new Smashing Pumpkins album. They're one of my favorite bands. I love their first two albums. Maybe they'll, save the day or at least provide some relief with another great album. And it was just so disappointing. It just, ugh.
I
So
felt like I was obligated to buy it because everybody was talking about it, and the songs were on MTV and the radio, and yeah, fell short of it. But again, I'm going to say 33, 1979. Love those songs.
Yeah, for me, the song "Farewell and Goodnight," I would suggest you should give a listen to. That's a good song. What makes a song interesting is all four members take a turn singing, which makes it kind of interesting. So, I mean, Melancholy, if you bring it down to one album, if you got Butch Vig producing it, I think would have been a lot better. I think that, yeah, then it could have been, but again, I'm saying a lot better. Meanwhile, there's a lot of Smashing Pumpkins fans that are going to call me a moron for saying that because that's probably their favorite Smashing Pumpkins album, and it sold what 10 million copies or whatever. So,
To each his own. To each his
yeah,
own. So,
exactly.
final question: after you spent so much time researching and writing about the Smashing Pumpkins, the formative years, what do you think is the single most important thing people should understand about that period, 1988 to 1984? Why does it still matter, or why should it still matter when we talk about the band today?
Well, like I said, to me, I still think that they're some of the best sounding albums of that era. Butch Vig, but also I think Billy Corgan had a lot to do with that. And really, Billy Corgan has to be commended that he took the time to really get a great guitar sound. Again, there was an era in the mid to late 80s where getting a great guitar sound was almost like not even considered. It's just like, yeah, just throw anything on an album. Who the hell cares, you know? I'm thinking to some of those like late 80s Kiss albums, or like I even mentioned Metallica, Injustice for All has like such a tinny guitar sound. It's like not ballsy at all, you know? Whereas if you just go back, like you mentioned, the Ride the Lightning album, at least there is, some, balls to it, you know? So,
Don't get me started on OU812.
ah, yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking now, even like 5150 didn't even have that great of a guitar sound, right?
Right. Although Martin Popoff seemed to speak highly of him. He says he feels that is the quintessential Brown sound, because the Brown sound was not so much Eddie's guitar, but it was Alex's drums. But
No, I don't agree with that at all. The Brown sound to me is the first album and also Fair Warning,
fair
probably.
warning. Yeah.
That to me is yeah, that's their best sounding albums. But yeah, but I mean, really, I think what we should get from Smashing Pumpkins is their ability to really bridge the gap between heavy metal and also alternative rock, but make it sound very natural. It wasn't like a forced. It's very interesting. What made Gish and Siamese Dream so special, it was not forced sounding, whereas to me, Melancholy sounded forced sounding.
Tell us when the book is out. I Am One: The Smashing Pumpkin Story, 1988 to 94. What is it out now?
It is in fact out now. Yes, it is. It's available as Kindle, hardcover, and paperback. And there is a audio version already recorded and done, but for some reason, the company is dragging their feet. So by the time you see this interview, there's probably a good chance it'll be done. If you're watching this video like a few months later, absolutely it's done. So
Okay.
you have
If
those
it,
four
yeah.
formats.
Well, and with these interviews, they remain online for years. So if it's the year 2036,
Yeah.
it's 10 years later,
Right.
it's definitely there.
Yes.
All right, cool. So it is out, and people can find you online, Facebook, Twitter, right? All those places.
Yes, exactly. If you want
Or
to check out my
X.
books, if you want to check out my books, go to Amazon.com, look up Greg Prato, and you can go to X and you can look up Greg Prato Writer. I'm there. And I'm always on X. I'm always posting my latest articles because I write for a bunch of sites. So I've done some very good interviews lately. I've interviewed Mike McCready from Pearl Jam and also Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth.
Oh,
Also Richie
great.
Faulkner from Judas Priest. Gary Holt. Yeah, Gary Holt from the band Exodus.
Right.
So I have done some pretty interesting interviews. And tonight I interviewed Eric.
That's right. That's right. Did you ever think about getting your own podcast?
It's funny. People have been telling me that for many years, and it seems like there's so many podcasts now that
Right.
I mean, I could theoretically, but just I don't know. There's just so many of them. I mean, I don't mean that as like a insult to you because I'm a huge
No,
fan
there's a
of your
million of them.
podcast. But just there's so many of them now. It's just like I don't know.
No, you know what? It would have to be something you have a passion for, like I do. So it's like
Yeah.
no matter what, you're going to do it because you love to do it. Like, just the process of me doing this, it makes me happy. So it's like
You
I'm
also
going
have
to
a
do it.
background. You also have a background with like radio and stuff,
Radio,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Whereas like I had no background with radio. So and I think we've talked about it in the past. I had no idea I was going to be a writer or an interviewer when I was younger. I kind of fell into this totally by accident. So that's also part of the thing. But
No,
I
I
don't
mean,
think
I
I
hear
really
you.
have much of a great. I don't know if I have a great radio voice with my Long Island accent.
You have that distinctive voice. I don't know. I think it would work, and you got all the connections, man. You'd have all the best guests. But no, I
I
mean, you have
do,
to really
but
want to do it because it's a lot of work.
it
And
is.
I think with podcasting too, you want to find like a niche. Like there's only like a few. There's this and one other podcast I know about that just focuses on books on rock and roll.
Well, now that I think about it, if like AI makes music websites completely obsolete, I may have no choice but to start
Oof.
doing like a podcast, right? With
Yeah.
doing like interviews and stuff like that. So,
Well, I think, but technology is going to keep up with that to where they're going to be able to find out. I actually just read an article about an author who got called out for writing a book, and there was a you can scan these books and determine if there's a particular language that okay, this is AI, and
yeah.
they pulled the book down.
If you go on if you go on Amazon, it's mind-boggling how many AI created books there are. I'm surprised Amazon actually allows these books to be sold.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah,
So there's a lot of them,
and I did some research, and they actually have a name for these books, which I think is a good name. AI slop books,
right?
which means it's just AI slop. Like you just
It's
enter in, all right, like these are the facts. I want this chapter to be about, Smashing Pumpkins 1992 tour. Go away. I mean, take it away.
are
And
they self-published?
yes,
Because
yes,
there's
they
no
are.
publisher that's going to
No,
allow that.
no, it just you can pretty much publish. I think. Oh, I mean, you got to meet the guidelines, but yeah, to the best of my knowledge, there's very little governing going on with Amazon. I'm shocked that they're allowing this to go on like they are. I guess it just comes down to making money, is what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
but I think they'll just catch up to it eventually because you
I
certainly
hope
can't.
so.
I would think that they're not quoting artists and stuff in these books because then you can't. I mean, legally, if you didn't
I
do
don't
the,
know. I
I don't
mean,
know.
honestly, I haven't bought any of them, but like I've read just like certain. And then what also makes no sense if you go on Amazon and look at these books, they use AI to even make the cover. And so say if you write a book about Smashing Pumpkins, I guess you feed it a picture of Billy Corgan, and what comes back is a picture of someone that looks like Billy Corgan, but it's not Billy
Right,
Corgan.
right.
And there's people that put out books like this, which I don't understand how that's even allowed. That makes no sense, you
Yeah,
know?
I will admit full honesty. I mean, I use AI for various things. I use AI to help with like the social media posts, and I use because there's so many things that I have to do, and those things that don't really require my writing for, I'm cool with. I used it to help with the new logo and stuff like that. So there's ways you can use it to your advantage.
Absolutely.
Um,
It's just like pretty much anything. It's, how you use it. If you use it as a tool, I'm absolutely all for it. If you use it to write a whole entire book or to, make up a cover that looks like a guy that looks like David Lee Roth, but it's not David Lee Roth, that to me just makes no sense.
it doesn't. It's just wrong. Yeah, but I do use it. I read through these books, but also I've been using it to throw a question at AI and say, hey, here's the book. Can you give me some questions? And I'll see. Maybe there'll be something in there that I never. Oh, that's right. I didn't think of asking. So if you utilize it in the right way and you put it all together with but at the end of the day, it's still going to be it's human beings that are going to connect the best. And yeah, I don't know. Who knows? We'll see where it goes. But
We'll see.
you're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Well,
So
thank you. Thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
And having said all that, I'm not really Eric Senich. I'm an AI created version of it. No, just kidding. I'm the real deal. All right, man. Thanks, Greg, as always, and we'll see you again down the road. I don't know if you want to tease us with any upcoming.
Well, you know what? Let's just say I have a book coming out in the summer, and I actually have maybe a book or two coming out around also Christmas time. But the book in the summer, I will tell you, is about one of the '80s top pop bands.
In the summer. Okay, one of the '80s top pop bands.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a full book on New Kids on the Block. How about that, huh?
You
In
got it.
depth. All right. Well, hey, I know you'll be keeping me posted on it. So
Yes.
cool, man. All right, Greg.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Adios.